Is my car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes.
Carol Burnett made millions laugh for 11 years straight. But in 1977, she did something that made her entire crew cry. The episode aired once and broke viewers' hearts. Critics called it brilliant. Awards poured in. But Carol never watched it again. Not once in 47 years. She said it was too real. The sketch hit so close to home. She couldn't bear seeing herself in it. What made America's funniest woman refuse to face her own performance? Carol Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas. From the very beginning, her life was surrounded by pain. Her parents, both alcoholics, were unable to care for her. Her father worked at a movie theater, but he couldn't hold a job for long. Her mother drank just as much and wasn't emotionally present. Both would later die from alcohol-related illness. By the time Carol was just a toddler, she had already learned what it felt like to be unwanted. The people meant to love her most had chosen bottles over bedtime stories. It was a lonely, unpredictable world, and Carol learned early on that laughter could protect her from breaking. When her parents fully gave up on raising her, Carol was taken in by her maternal grandmother, Mabel White. In 1940, they left Texas and moved to Hollywood, but there was no red carpet waiting. They lived in a single, cramped room in a run-down boarding house, surrounded by other broken souls. Addicts, mentally ill tenants, people clinging to hope while starving on welfare. Carol and her grandmother survived on $20 a week, barely enough for food, let alone a dream. But Mabel gave Carol what she'd never had before: unconditional love. She was poor, yes, but she was finally safe. In the middle of that chaos, Carol invented an escape. She created a pretend twin sister named Karen. Karen was everything Carol wasn't: confident, beautiful, always smiling. And Carol made her so real that even the other tenants believed she existed. She'd run up the fire escape, change clothes, change her hair, and reappear as Karen, charming and playful. Then, minutes later, she'd return as Carol. The fact that these adults, many of them barely hanging on themselves, believed it says a lot about both Carol's acting skill and how much everyone in that house needed something joyful to believe in. But some escapes were more real than others. Every Saturday, Carol and her grandmother would go to the movies. Tickets cost 25 cents for two, more than 10% of their weekly income. For those few hours, Carol left behind the peeling paint, the shouting, and the fear. On screen, life sparkled. Stars danced, people kissed. There was food, beauty, and order. But when the credits rolled, survival came back into focus. They couldn't afford toilet paper at home, so they'd quietly steal it from the theater bathroom. They weren't ashamed. They were desperate. Even at 7 years old, Carol understood what it meant to be hungry for more than food. One day, sitting in that darkened theater, she heard Johnny Weissmuller's famous Tarzan yell echo through the room. It hit her like lightning. At home, she began mimicking it obsessively, perfecting every pitch and rhythm. She had no idea she was training her voice, building the kind of breath control most singers take years to master. It was just a game, but it became a signature. That yell would later bring down audiences in laughter and applause during her live shows. What began as a child's imitation became one of the first tools in her comedy arsenal. By the time Carol finished high school, she had one dream: journalism. Her mother had always wanted to be a writer, and Carol felt obligated to finish what her mother couldn't. UCLA was the goal. But when the time came to enroll, she faced a brutal reality. She didn't have the $50 needed to cover tuition. That's around $600 today. For most people, it would have meant the end. And for a while, it seemed like it was. Then something strange happened. A stranger, whose identity she never learned, stepped in and paid the amount. No strings, no explanation. Just enough money to change her life. At UCLA, she planned to study journalism, but one elective theater class flipped her world upside down. In that room, something inside her clicked. She wasn't shy anymore. She wasn't poor or invisible. She was funny, loud, and completely alive. Her professors noticed it. So did her classmates. She could sing, act, and make people laugh in the same breath. Suddenly, journalism looked too small for her. She switched majors. It was risky, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't surviving. She was dreaming. That risk paid off quickly. At the end of her freshman year, she was named Most Promising Newcomer in UCLA's theater program. It was more than a title. It was a prophecy. It told her she wasn't crazy for chasing this dream. It gave her the courage to push harder, to take the stage seriously, and to stop apologizing for wanting more than just survival. The award opened doors, giving her better roles in school productions and support from mentors who could see she wasn't like the others. She wasn't just another hopeful actress. She had the kind of spark you couldn't fake. Carol Burnett was just a college junior in 1954, working as an usherette for 65 cents an hour, when her life took a strange turn at a party in San Diego. She wasn't there to celebrate. She was stuffing hors d'oeuvres into her purse to bring home to her grandmother. That's when a sharply dressed stranger approached her. He wasn't in showbiz. He was a millionaire shipbuilder from La Jolla. Carol told him she dreamed of going to New York to make it on Broadway, but couldn't even afford UCLA's $43 tuition. The man made her an offer that sounded too good to be true, $1,000 each for her and her boyfriend, Don Saroyan. But he gave them 3 rules. Never reveal his name, only use the money to get to New York, and if they made it, they had to help others do the same. He didn't want credit. He just said someone had once helped him, and he was paying it forward. His wife would later say he'd done this kind of thing before, for gas stations, restaurants, and people chasing dreams. With the $2,000 in hand, Carol and Don packed up and left UCLA behind. They headed east in 1954, even though Carol had never been further than Texas. She didn't know anyone in New York, but she didn't care. She said later, "I didn't know enough to be scared." They landed in the city and checked into the Algonquin Hotel at $9 a night. It was too much. The money started disappearing fast. At one point, Carol broke down crying while making a collect call to her family, who begged her to come back. Then, right as she was about to give up, she heard a radio announcement. A hurricane named Carol was moving up the coast. She took it as a sign. Somehow, it gave her strength to stay. She soon found herself in a completely different world, the rehearsal club. It was an old boarding house for young women trying to break into the arts. For $18 a week, Carol got a cot in a shared room with 4 other actresses. There was only 1 bathroom and 1 closet, but to her, it was paradise. She'd been sleeping on a couch back home. The place buzzed with energy. Girls practicing lines, singing, running around with curlers in their hair. To make ends meet, Carol worked as a hat check girl at night and auditioned during the day. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. In March 1955, she and the other girls put on a show called the Rehearsal Club Review and mailed out invitations to agents and producers. Big names like Marlene Dietrich showed up. That night, doors started opening. Her first big break came from something totally ridiculous. A love song about John Foster Dulles, the stiff, ultra-serious U.S. Secretary of State. Written by Ken Welch, it was a joke song, over the top and absurd. But Carol performed it so perfectly that it became her signature. The audiences went wild. She got invited onto the Jack Paar Show and then the Ed Sullivan Show. On January 6, 1957, she stepped out onto the Sullivan stage with her knees shaking. But by the end of her set, people were howling with laughter. In August that same year, she went back to perform the Dulles song again, plus a parody of Puppy Love. That ridiculous ballad turned her into the talk of New York comedy. For the next 5 years, Carol kept grinding. She had a small role on The Paul Winchell Show in 1955, where she played a ventriloquist's dummy's girlfriend. That led to a part alongside Buddy Hackett in Stanley, which only lasted a year. But in 1959, everything changed. Carol landed the lead in Once Upon a Mattress, a new off-Broadway musical that got picked up for Broadway. She played Princess Winifred, a loud, clumsy girl from the marsh who was completely unlike any fairy tale princess. The show exploded in popularity. She earned her first Tony nomination. And on June 22, 1959, exactly 5 years after she got that mysterious loan, Carol and Don paid back the full $2,000. The millionaire never responded. He stayed anonymous to the very end. By then, Carol was earning $500 a week, which to her felt like hitting the jackpot. Once Upon a Mattress wasn't even supposed to be a hit. It started as a small summer camp project. Critics didn't love it when it debuted on Broadway in May 1959, but audiences did. The show ran for 470 performances, moving from theater to theater. Carol's performance made the difference. When she left the cast in June 1960, the show collapsed host within a week. Her replacement only lasted 8 performances before it closed completely. Carol had become irreplaceable. Then came The Gary Moore Show. From 1959 to 1962, Carol went from rising star to full-on television powerhouse. She won her first Emmy in 1962. Her cleaning lady character became iconic, but the real impact of that show was in what it taught her. Gary Moore's unrehearsed Q&A warm-ups inspired the live audience interactions that would later define The Carol Burnett Show. The show also helped launch other major stars, including Don Knotts and Jonathan Winters. It ran from 1950 to 1967 and became one of the most influential variety shows ever. For Carol, it was a masterclass in timing, character, and risk. In 1962, something magical happened again, this time at Carnegie Hall. CBS was hesitant to let her do a special with Julie Andrews. They said Julie wasn't famous enough, and Carol was already on TV every week. But one night after a promo event, the two executives in charge, Michael Dann and Oscar Katz, saw Carol struggling to get a taxi. She joked that a truck driver would probably give her a ride home instead. Moments later, a truck actually pulled up and offered her a lift. The execs took it as fate. The show got approved. That special, Julie and Carol at Carnegie Hall, won 3 major awards, including an Emmy and a Rose d'Or. Columbia Records even released a soundtrack that hit number 85 on the charts, but nothing compared to what came next. On September 11, 1967, The Carol Burnett Show premiered, and with it, television changed forever. Carol broke through a wall no one thought a woman could break. ChatGPT said, for 11 straight seasons, from September 11, 1967 to March 29, 1978, The Carol Burnett Show pulled in 30 million viewers every single week. That wasn't just good, it was historic. Few shows have ever reached that kind of audience. It became more than entertainment. It was an event. Time magazine even named it one of the 100 best television shows of all time. TV Guide placed it at 17. Variety ranked it 23. That's how big it was. But this wasn't just about big numbers. The show changed television itself. It was one of the first variety shows to feature live comedy skits in front of a studio audience. That style went on to inspire Saturday Night Live. And Carol Burnett? She broke serious ground. She wasn't just another star. She was one of the first women to lead her own variety show. At a time when most of television was run by men, she changed the rules and opened the door for countless women in comedy. No matter the day or time slot, the show held strong. Whether it aired Monday nights at 10 or Saturday nights later on, people kept watching. That kind of consistency is rare, and it wasn't just the fans who noticed. During its 11-year run, The Carol Burnett Show won a jaw-dropping 25 Primetime Emmy Awards. That's right, 25. The awards weren't all in one area either. The show won for writing, musical material, choreography, and, of course, Best Variety Series. Harvey Korman picked up 4 Emmys of his own in 1969, 1971, 1972, and 1974 for Outstanding Supporting Performance. Tim Conway also won 4, 3 for acting and 1 for writing. Even the show's final season in 1978 went out with a bang, sweeping multiple categories including Best Variety Series. And it didn't stop there. Carol Burnett herself took home 2 Golden Globes for Best Actress in a comedy or musical in both 1977 and 1978. The show also won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Variety Program 3 years in a row, 1975, 1977, and 1978. That kind of sweep across so many different awards solidified its place as TV royalty. Most variety shows since then haven't even come close. But behind the scenes, not everything was laughter and applause. During the show's 7th season, Harvey Korman nearly walked away for good. That week, guest stars included Tim Conway and singer Petula Clark, 2 of the kindest people in showbiz. But Korman wasn't in the mood. During rehearsals, he was rude and irritable. Carol Burnett usually let things slide, but not this time. She pulled him aside after the Friday night taping and asked what was going on. Korman gave a brutal answer. "I'm just not happy here," he said. Then he slammed the dressing room door in her face. That was it. Burnett called his agent and fired him. But over the weekend, Korman changed his mind. He begged for another chance. Burnett agreed, but with one condition. She told him him, "Monday morning, I want to see you skipping and whistling down the hallway at CBS." And that's exactly what he did. When he stepped off the elevator Monday morning, he was skipping and whistling. Burnett burst out laughing and had a plaque made for his door, Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. Corman stayed with the show through season 10. Then came Tim Conway. Conway was the wild card. He had a rule: never go all out in rehearsals. He saved his best bits for the live tapings, even if it threw everyone else off. "Some of it comes on the spur of the moment," he once said, "and some I keep in the back of my mind." That strategy meant every performance was fresh and totally unpredictable. Harvey Korman said it best: "He never does anything the same way twice." The most famous moment of Conway's chaos came during The Elephant Story. In a sketch from the Family series, he told a long, ridiculous tale about a circus elephant. As he rambled on, Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, and Dick Van Dyke tried everything to stay in character. But the story kept getting funnier and weirder. By the end, even Vicki Lawrence lost it. She hit back with a line so unexpected, it cracked up everyone on set. "Are you sure that little asshole is through?" Even Conway broke into hysterical laughter. Moments like that became the soul of the show. Raw, real, and completely unscripted. But not every scene was funny. In 1977, something happened that shook Carol Burnett deeply. It came from one of the recurring sketches, The Family. She played Eunice Higgins, a woman weighed down by disappointment and crushed dreams. Normally, the sketch mixed comedy with dysfunction, but this time they took a risk. No jokes, no exaggeration, just pain. The sketch was called The Gong Show. In it, Eunice believes that singing feelings on a talent show will finally launch her to fame. Instead, the judges mock her. One of them was played by real-life game show host Alan Ludden. Burnett played the role straight. No funny accent, no silly movement, and by the end, the entire crew was close to tears. When the episode aired, it didn't lose its punch. The camera pulled back slowly on Eunice's tear-streaked face as the lights dimmed. No music, no laughter, just heartbreak. Viewers were stunned. Critics praised it, but Burnett never watched it again. In a 2010 interview, she said, "It was too real. Eunice's pain felt like my own. That's because it was real." Burnett had grown up in poverty. She knew what it felt like to dream big and get laughed at. That sketch hit too close to home. She later explained her feelings in an interview with Harper's Bazaar. "I'm glad we did it," she said, "but it wasn't what our show was about. We were there to make people forget their troubles, not remind them." Still, the sketch left a mark. It led to a TV movie in 1982 called Eunice and a spin-off sitcom, Mama's Family. Burnett eventually walked away from the sitcom, unhappy with its direction, but the original episode remained legendary. Carol Burnett didn't just make people laugh. Behind the scenes, her life was full of heartbreak, chaos, and family battles that would have broken most people. It all started in college, when she met her first husband, Don Soroyan. They were young, in love, and both dreamed of making it big in show business. He was born in Omaha in 1928 and had big Broadway ambitions. They met at UCLA in 1952 and married 3 years later, in 1955, but their love story didn't last. Don's daughter from a previous relationship died, and he was never the same. Carol's career took off while his stalled. The pressure cracked their marriage. They separated on Christmas Day in 1959 and divorced in 1962. Don battled depression and alcoholism until his death in 1990 at just 62. He never reached the stage dreams he once had. Carol didn't stay single long. She met Joe Hamilton soon after. Joe was a big-time TV producer and already had 8 children from his previous marriage. He had also produced Carol's Carnegie Hall concert in 1962. They married in 1963 and worked together on her hit show. They had 3 daughters, Carrie, Jody, and Erin, and a miscarriage in 1965. With Joe's 8 and their 3, their house was always full. He won 5 Emmy Awards while producing Carol's show. But while their careers soared, their home life cracked. In 1976, the National Enquirer printed a lie that Carol was drunk at a restaurant while sitting near Henry Kissinger. That hit her hard, not just because it was false, but because she had spent years speaking out against alcoholism. She sued the tabloid for $1.6 million. The case lasted 5 years and revealed how reckless tabloids could be. A paid informant had actually told the Enquirer that Carol wasn't drunk, but they ran the story anyway. She won the case, but after appeals, it was settled for around $200,000. It wasn't about the money. It was about clearing her name, and it changed tabloid journalism forever. But the biggest battle of her life wasn't in court. It was at home. In the late 1970s, her daughter Carrie fell into drug addiction hard. At just 13, Carrie was using cocaine, marijuana, mushrooms, and quaaludes. She later said she used drugs so she could stop being Carol Burnett's daughter and just be her own person. From 1976 to 1979, Carol watched her child slip away. She sent her to rehab after rehab. At one point, Carrie ran away from a Texas facility. Carol feared she might lose her daughter forever. Carrie eventually got sober at 17, but it came at a cost. Carol had to make the hardest decision of her life. Carrie hated her for it. But Carol once said, "You have to love them enough to let them hate you." For over a year, they didn't speak, but she never gave up. And when Carrie came back, they became closer than ever. Carrie landed a major role on the TV series Fame, proving she had talent of her own. She and Carol acted together in movies, episodes, and finally wrote a play called Hollywood Arms, based on Carol's life. They were joined at the hip, but tragedy struck again. In 2002, Carrie died from pneumonia caused by lung cancer that had spread to her brain. She was only 38. She never got to see Hollywood Arms open on stage. Carol was crushed, but she pushed on, saying, "I owed it to Carrie." Carol's second marriage had already ended in 1984. By then, Carrie's addiction, the pressure of their careers, and the emotional strain had worn down her and Joe Hamilton. They had sent their two younger daughters to live in Hawaii so they wouldn't see their parents fall apart. After the divorce, Joe stayed close to the family until he died of cancer in 1991. But even after two marriages and two massive heartbreaks, Carol found love again. In the late 1990s, she met Brian Miller while performing in Long Beach. He was 23 years younger, but that didn't matter. They got married in 2001. She was 68 and he was 45. Just 2 months later, Carrie died. Brian helped Carol get through the darkest time in her life. He encouraged her to finish Hollywood Arms, and they've stayed together ever since. In 20s on 20, when Carol's youngest daughter Erin was battling addiction and couldn't care for her own son, Carol and Brian stepped up. They took custody of their grandson Dylan. Erin's addiction had become a 19-year nightmare. She'd been in rehab 8 times, spending nearly 240 days institutionalized. The courts got involved when Erin's home became unsafe for her son. In July 2020, Erin sent suicide threats to her children. Police had to step in, and she was placed on a psychiatric hold. Carol filed for legal guardianship of Dylan shortly after. Within weeks, the court gave Carol and Brian temporary custody. Once again, she was stepping in to protect her family, even when it broke her heart. Carol Burnett stunned everyone when she appeared in the final season of Better Call Saul. She was 89 years old, but her acting was sharper than ever. She played Marion, a kind but sharp elderly woman who slowly uncovered the truth about Saul Goodman. In the episode Waterworks, she sat quietly in her kitchen, using Ask Jeeves to dig into Saul's lies. What she found changed everything. "I trusted you." That moment was unforgettable. Saul panicked. The tension built up until she delivered a single line that crushed him. He even considered silencing her forever. The show's co-creator, Vince Gilligan, later admitted that writing a scene where Saul thought about killing Carol Burnett's character felt awful. "She's an American treasure," he said, but that's what made it so powerful. Her quiet strength and trembling voice made viewers sit on edge. Then she calmly hit her life alert button and turned Saul in. Critics called it one of the most chilling and brilliant moments in the show's history. That wasn't the only time Burnett surprised people with her range. Back in the 90s, she joined the cast of Mad About You as a guest star. The show was already a hit, starring Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt, but Burnett's performance as Teresa took it to another level. In 1997, she won the Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series. That win proved she wasn't just a sketch comedian. She could handle modern sitcoms just as easily. Her scenes felt real, natural, not the loud physical comedy from her variety show days. It was quieter, smarter, and deeply funny. She won the American Comedy Award for her guest role 2 years in a row. That wasn't luck. It was skill built from decades in front of an audience. And those 2 awards were just part of her massive total of 25 Emmy nominations throughout her career. In the 2000s, Burnett's voice took over where her physical comedy left off. She jumped into animated films, lending her voice to colorful characters that lit up the screen. Her biggest success came in 2008 in Horton Hears a Who, a CGI adaptation of a Dr. Seuss classic. She acted alongside Jim Carrey and Steve Carell, and the film became a global hit, pulling in $298 million on an $85 million budget. Years earlier, in 2001, she voiced Mrs. Hammerbotham in The Trumpet of the Swan, teaming up with Reese Witherspoon, Jason Alexander, and Mary Steenburgen. These roles introduced her to a whole new generation of kids who had never seen The Carol Burnett Show. But her voice carried the same warmth, charm, and wit. She didn't need to be on screen to make an impact. Her voice did all the work. Burnett's return to Broadway at the end of the 1990s felt like a homecoming. She starred in Stephen Sondheim's musical review, Putting It Together, which opened at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre on November 21, 1999. It ran for 101 performances and 22 previews. Burnett played the wife, standing beside theater greats like George Hearn, Ruthie Henschel, and John Barrowman. It had been 30 years since she last performed on Broadway, but when she hit the stage, it was like she never left. The show was even filmed live for television and home release, capturing moments both polished and unscripted, like when her skirt fell during a scene and she turned it into a gag mid-performance. Even critics who gave the overall show mixed reviews had nothing but praise for Burnett. She handled Sondheim's complicated music with ease, proving her stage presence was still unmatched. And just when people thought she had done it all, Carol Burnett reappeared, this time on Apple TV+. In 2024, she starred in Palm Royale as Norma Delacorte, a wealthy Palm Beach woman who spends most of the series in a coma until she suddenly wakes up. The role demanded a lot. Not only did Burnett have to perform physical comedy, she also had to create a kind of gibberish dialogue to mimic someone just regaining speech. She made it all up on the spot. That level of improvisation isn't easy at any age, but Burnett was 91. Her work earned her a nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series, making her the oldest female nominee in Emmy history. The show premiered on March 20th, 2024, and went on to earn 11 nominations. The cast was packed with stars: Kristen Wiig, Ricky Martin, Laura Dern, Allison Janney, but Burnett still stood out. And once again, new viewers discovered a woman who had been entertaining the world for over 7 decades.